Hi students. This is just a short video to talk a little bit about this week's material and also what you can expect on the course midterm, the first main exam this week. So a few things to say about this week's material. Of course, by now you've taken a look at Chapter 8. That's our big textbook chapter this week, and it's a very major one, dealing with two very significant issues: unemployment, the primary subject, and also inflation. Now, inflation we dealt with quite a bit in the previous chapter. We took a look at how we gauge inflation by preparing the CPI, right, the Consumer Price Index, and gave you some means of calculating those index values. You had some practice calculating an inflation rate based on those in Quiz 4. This week is more focused on the labor market, the job market. There's some discussion of inflation later in the chapter. So the main thing you'll be seeing is those job market, the labor market analyses. And particularly what you need to be familiar with there is the different calculation methods we use for getting the rates associated with analysis of the job market. And the two big ones there, of course, are the unemployment rate and also the LFPR, the lesser known labor force participation rate. Now, the unemployment rate you reported on television all the time, and it's relatively easy to calculate. Just still, it's simple, but it is something that students do struggle with sometimes. So just remember, the unemployment rate is the number of designated unemployed in a labor market divided by the labor force, not the number of employed. And of course, the labor force indicator, simply the sum of the designated employed plus the unemployed. The employed plus the unemployed, that's the labor force. So the unemployment rate is the number of unemployed divided by the number of employed plus unemployed. All right? And of course that's a rate, so you'll convert that to a percentage value. But that's all you need to do there. Usually mistakes are students will divide by something other than the labor force, or they'll miscalculate that. Likewise, the other main measure we use is the labor force participation rate, and that's simply the labor force, again, the sum of employed plus unemployed, divided by the working age population. So it's usually the non-institutionalized population over 16, typically. And that gives you the proportion of working age people who are either categorized as employed plus unemployed. Now, why do we need the second measurement? Well, there are two reasons why folks are not in the labor force even though they're of working age. Well, I guess we could say there's three main reasons. First, of course, is retirement, right? So if you're retired, you're typically over 16, but you're not actively working or looking for a job. A lot of folks work in retirement, but that makes it not really retirement, right? So if you're retired, you're out of the labor force, as we categorize you. And likewise, if you're a full-time student, okay, who's not working on the side, that would reduce the labor force participation rate. And also if you're a discouraged worker. The big value of the LFPR is it allows us to keep track of discouragement among the workforce. So if you take a look in the beginning of Chapter 8, when we define the unemployed as indicated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to be counted as unemployed, you have to be not merely out of a job, but additionally be actively engaged in a job search. Okay, so if you're out of work but not actively looking, congratulations, you're not unemployed anymore. That's great news. But it does mean that as recessions drag on, as the economy continues to contract, you do have this situation where you have an increasing number of unemployed workers who are all competing for a diminishing number of jobs as GDP and employment contract in the downward phase of the business cycle. And when that happens, the job search itself is not free. It costs money to drive around, put gas in the car so you can put in resumes, or go online and pay for Monster.com or LinkedIn or other unemployed job search sites. All these things cost money, and as recessions go on and the odds against finding a job only get more challenging, it's not completely unreasonable for someone in the workforce to decide to put off continuing the job search for a while, since it's draining money, and wait at least until the economy improves enough to be more worth the time and money associated with the job search. Well, when that happens, okay, if you're no longer actively looking for work, you're not considered as unemployed anymore. You're considered to have dropped out of the labor force. So usually during recessions, we'll see the LFPR number going down. So first, as the recession starts, the number of unemployed increases as layoffs begin. But as conditions stay bad, often the unemployed number will kind of flatten out. It'll kind of reach a plateau, even though there's no job creation happening, because many of these people have been unemployed long enough that they're sufficiently discouraged to give up on the job search, at least for a time. And whatever opinions about that people have, we should realize that that pushes down the LFPR. And if we want to keep track of discouragement in the workforce, that's the main indicator that allows us to do it, besides the BLS's own regular surveys. So that's important. So remember, labor force participation rate is the labor force divided by the working age population. And to the extent you have discouraged workers, full-time students, or retirees, that's going to tend to push down the LFPR. And for a typical developed economy like ours, a normal sort of typical LFPR number is something like 65, 66%, about 2/3. So you've got retirees, full-time students, some people who aren't working or engaged in a job search. Comes to about 1/3 of the labor force, I should say. So be prepared for that type of consideration when you do the problems associated with the job market, because that's something where students do often make mistakes, and you want to be familiar with how to calculate that, and also how to interpret the news you see on TV. Frequently when recessions end and job creation returns and more jobs, people are finding work, hiring is returning, we'll often find that the unemployment rate doesn't really go down even though the recession's over, and it will stay at an elevated level for some time. Because even though people are leaving the unemployment category as they get jobs, a lot of these folks who have been out of work and discouraged during the recession are now re-entering the workforce, because now maybe it makes more sense to look for a job again. And if you have about the same number of people returning from discouragement as are finding jobs, the unemployment rate will stay right there. Okay, people who are coming back into the market are going to be about balanced by people getting jobs. It doesn't always happen that way. It depends on conditions, but it's common. So you want to understand that. What else do you need to say about Chapter 8? I think that's adequate. Okay, you'll see those things as you get into the chapter. Now, as far as this week in the class, there's two things to mention. First, of course, this week, as usual, in week 5, you'll have a quiz. It's your typical quiz, 15 questions and a half hour to deal with it. And it's specifically about Chapter 8. It gives you a chance to practice and earn some points for calculating unemployment rates, talking about the different categories of unemployment, which you'll see in the chapter, and some other stuff. And it will also leave you better prepared, I think, for the big event this week, of course, which is the midterm, Exam 1. And this is about ready. I always tweak this a little bit every year, so it should become available tomorrow, that is to say Friday of this week. Should be done with it about then. And just like the quiz and most of your work in general, that'll be due Sunday night at midnight. At normal time, same as the quiz. And let's see, the exam this time around, this term, it's 25 questions. You have 45 minutes to complete. 45 minutes. And yeah, it should go up tomorrow. It's due at the usual time. It is a comprehensive exam, though, you need to realize. So there will be questions about supply and demand, questions about basic concepts and terms from the first 2 chapters, and questions about the CPI, the unemployment rate, inflation, and GDP. So it does cover a lot of real estate. You'll recall, if you look at the syllabus, we've gone through in the main Krugman book, chapters 1 through 3 and 6 through 8. And those will be the ones that you are liable for on this first exam. And there will be a question or two out of your reader as well, focusing on those reader articles, of course, that we've looked at already from your current edition of your reader. And if you want to take a quick look at those, you can use the syllabus as your guide, right? Each week we let you know which real-world macro pieces you'll be responsible for. So take an opportunity to at least familiarize yourself with that before you jump into the exam on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I think that's what needs to be said. I've got a number of emails about the exam, which I'm answering now, part of the reason why I put this video together. was to make sure everyone would find out about this. But the test shouldn't be too challenging if you've been keeping up with the course material. It's really just a matter of doing a review beforehand and being prepared. And I'd say especially if you look over the past quizzes, basically the same question formats, and it will be over the same sort of important curriculum elements. So that could be one way to kind of get your brain stretched out and prepared for that test. But it shouldn't be too punishing if you're on top of this stuff. So that said, I'll be answering a few more emails today and tomorrow and checking out the discussion board. So I'll see you on there, and good luck.